Hey everybody, video here for you today. Haven't had a lot of time for YouTube in the past week. My daughter was in town and a few other things going on. I'm still learning my new recording system and all the options that come with that as far as interviews and stuff like that. I may sound intelligent when talking about ancient history, but I'm a tech idiot, really. I am. So that has been kind of a slow process, and I want to say thanks to the people who support me on Patreon. I took a look at that this morning, some new notifications, and I'm going to be making some videos for those people coming up too. But today, as I compete with the dog barking out there, we are going to talk about 5 different news stories that have been in the news lately. Today, we are going down to Akrotiri in Greece on the island of Santorini, and they've been doing some research out here. And they found some Minoan artifacts. But here is a look at the island of Santorini, and this blew about 3,600 years ago, covering Egypt with darkness at the time. 250,000 Hyksos were going north and exiting out of the country. But here is the area where they've been doing some archaeological work, and I'm going to leave a link to all these stories. So if you want to look into this further, you can read. This is the Greek Reporter. It says, spectacular findings uncovered in Santorini's Akrotiri archaeological dig. Story came out on the 31st of January, but here, Minoan artifacts, some of the stuff they have found that they have dug down to. And of course, Santorini was buried in ash and debris. Here are some of the more interesting findings that they have found in the most recent pics here. Here is another pic, painted black and white pottery found at the Akrotiri site. Also some decorated shells here. It says Akrotiri, a Bronze Age settlement from Santorini's Minoan culture, was destroyed in a massive volcanic eruption sometime in the 16th century BC. The city was completely buried in volcanic ash, which preserved the remains of fine frescoes and many other artworks and objects, much like what later occurred in the city of Pompeii near Italy's Mount Vesuvius. That is a story from Santorini. I have not spoken about that island for a while, but next place we are going to go to is to the north, Çatalhöyük in Turkey. And I did a video on Çatalhöyük about probably 2 years ago now, but this is the ancient site in Turkey. The people lived at this site about 8,000 years ago, and there has been a lot of archaeological work done here. This is one of the more well-known sites in Turkey. There are so many besides Göbekli Tepe and the ones we know about, but this one, there has been a lot of work done here. Let's just read what they found recently. This comes from the Archaeology website. Neolithic bone figurine unearthed in Turkey. This comes from a few days ago. Here is the bone. Some designs on it here. Some say it's an anthropomorphic figurine of some sort. It says, according to a Science in Poland report, a 2-inch piece of donkey bone thought to have been carved into an anthropomorphic figurine some 8,000 years ago has been unearthed by an international team at Çatalhöyük, the site of a large Neolithic settlement in southern Turkey that was inhabited for more than 1,000 years. This is undoubtedly an important find with a very simplified but clear depiction of human features in the form of eyes. And it says she found the artifact while screening the contents of a bin recovered from a room at Çatalhöyük where food had been stored between 6,500 and 6,300 BC. But here's that donkey bone. Are these eyes on here? And anybody can leave their guesses. Let's go on to the next story. Çatalhöyük is a pretty interesting place, and they have found a lot of cool stuff here, kind of gotten some ideas of how life was like 9,000 years ago. But now let's go to Washington in the United States. A find was made here recently, and we will talk about that. Maybe goes along with my Ancient America series a little. We're coming down to Port Angeles in Washington here, and this was found in an area called the Olympic Discovery Trail, right down in here. And this is the area where I guess more than a few bones have been found. Let's just read. Here is the Herald Net from Everett, Washington. Here they have part of the trail closed off where remains were found. It says, barricades, construction fencing, and a warning sign block a section of the Olympic Discovery Trail near Four Seasons Ranch, east of Port Angeles, at the site where human remains were discovered near a storm-damaged portion of the trail. It says the bones found near Port Angeles likely to be 500 to 1,000 years old. So I think that is yet to be determined. If the remains are found to be Native American, they will be returned to tribal members, and I have talked about that situation when that controversy has arisen. A complete human skull, including the mandible and a possible scapula, were found January 14th by a man and his son on the Port Angeles Harbor waterfront abutting the trail, which is part of the Olympic Discovery Trail. There's a high probability the remains are Native Americans, says Lower Elwha tribal archaeologist Bill White on Thursday. But I will leave the link to this story below, coming from Washington. That is a story probably keep the eyes on. Now let's go up to the north, way up to the north, Çatalhöyük Island. And this is way up by the Arctic Ocean here. And this is way up in what they call the Siberia Sea. I think that's the name of this place up here. But this is Çatalhöyük Island here. We'll just talk about what they found. This is a Siberian Times. It says, Arctic Island, woolly mammoth shows strongest evidence yet of human slaughter and butchering. Ancient men cut out all the meat, severed the trunk, removed the brain, and pulled out the bone marrow of this mammoth that I believe is found on the shoreline up in this island here. The Çatalhöyük Island woolly mammoth was killed by humans some 21,000 years ago, say scientists. They shared new pictures of the remains that were found at the site. It says the traces on the bone show that the mammoth was killed and butchered by ancient people, he said. I believe no other mammoths previously found in the world had such clear signs of being hunted by humans. We found cuts all over the ribs. There are traces of spear strikes with chips left from the darts. Here's a look at what these creatures look like, but the question to me is if we had ice over large portions of North America, and there was mammoths up here on the Arctic islands just flourishing, what was the Earth like 21,000 years ago? I'd like to know. Here is this area today where they found the remains. What was Earth like 20,000 years ago when mammoths were roaming this island near the Arctic Ocean, and what were sea levels like? These are all questions I ask. Now, humans use this one for food, but once again, I think the story that humans hunted all the mammoths and elephants and camels and sloths and giant-faced bears and saber-toothed cats and all these other huge creatures that roam North America, that humans wiped them all out in a pretty short amount of time. I think that story is absurd. I know Randall Carlson talks about that a lot, but I did make a video on that subject a month or two ago, and I will leave the link for that video below. But in this article, they have the bones here, the evidence of human predation. I will leave the link to this and all the stories below if you want to read on. But that was a pretty interesting story coming from 20,000 years ago. But now we are going to head down to Italy, Mount Vesuvius. And here we are down at ancient Mount Vesuvius. This erupted in 79 of the current era and buried Pompeii and other nearby cities. This is ScienceAlert.com. I have seen the story on a few different websites, but that black molten material right there, it says, a Vesuvius victim had his brain turned into glass, the study says. The devastating volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 in the current era, which wiped out the settlements including Pompeii and blasts of molten glass and ash, may have turned the brains of some of its sorry victims into glass, a new study says. Temperature at the site could have been as high as 520 degrees Celsius or about 968 degrees Fahrenheit, based on an analysis of nearby charred wood. The detection of a glassy material from the victim's head, of proteins expressed in the human brain, and of fatty acids found in human hair indicates the thermally induced preservation of vitrified human brain tissue, writes researchers. Those are 5 ancient history news stories I thought I would cover today. Look at news from around the world. Hope you thought that was interesting. You all have a very nice day.